a video on pumpkin soup. So it's that time of year again. There's lots of cheap supermarket pumpkins. They are not the best tasting pumpkins out there. You can get different pumpkins which taste nicer. However, once you've done what you want with these pumpkins, they do make a nice soup. You just got to treat them a little bit differently. A bit of a pain to work with, especially the big ones. Well, if you're Cardiff pumpkin, you'll kind of know that. So we're going to do it two ways. We're going to do the faffing around and cutting all the flesh off the skin method, and then we're going to do the basically roasting in the oven method. So, but anyway, we need to kind of cut into it. So, good sharp knife, and I'm going to do it two ways. You can actually do this with a saw, you know, like a wood saw, and just carve your way through it. So we'll do it in half first, because we're going to do it in two batches. And then just split here, and it should just pop into two, like so. We need to get rid of the seeds and all this stuff on the inside, because that's going to be no good for the soup, because we'll just end up having to strain it out, which, if we don't have to strain it, if we can do something so we don't have to strain it, that's much better. So get rid of all the gunk from the inside. I'm not sure something to put this in. I have got a container, that's alright. So, stringy bits and seeds, and that container will do. So, I could do something with the seeds, but can't be bothered. I'll just be giving myself a bit of work. So, nothing wrong with stringy bits, it's just that they don't blend down just that easily to best off just to get rid of them. Most of the problem with these larger pumpkins and the cheap ones that you buy in the supermarket is they're just full of water. They're grown for their shape, and they'll be relatively fast growing, and they're not designed to be really eaten, so they don't concentrate on the flavour of them, more of the colour and the shape. So as there's more water inside, it just means that we get less of a yield of soup, but still, as they are cheap, that's not really going to matter. So I'm only going to do half of it, but I'll show you what I'm going to do. So to roast it, half again, then half again, and then I think that'll be about, no, we'll do it half again. So in these type of lengths, not eating any of that up. Get rid of that. And then onto a tray with some baking parchment, if you don't want to do any washing up. Onto a tray with some baking parchment. We're not roasting it, as in we don't want any colour on it. We just want to soften it in the oven, and then it's easily, you can remove it from the skin. So on a tray like that, in the oven, 150 degrees, until it's nice and soft, and you can pull away the pulp away from the skin. So that's that method, which you'll see when I cook tomorrow. I'm just doing it today, and then we'll actually cook it tomorrow. So, but you'll see what they're like, but on a tray, baking parchment, in the oven, 150 degrees, until they're nice and soft. Now, to not do that method, it's a little bit more complicated and a little bit more dangerous, but it kind of depends on what you want to do. The easiest way to get the skin off the pumpkin is just to kind of go around it. So, like there, like there, there, there. You kind of need a half decent knife to do this, and you do lose a bit of pulp, but not too much. So that's that. So just have a quick check over, see if we left any on. If we haven't, that's fine. But then those go in compost, and then manageable chunks about that size, and then we're going to boil those up in with some onions and some stock, and we're going to make a delicious soup. Easy peasy. But I'll weigh how much pumpkin flesh we end up with, and then you kind of get an idea of, and I'll also weigh the pumpkin as well, and kind of say what size of pumpkin gives you what kind of weight. So I'll do that now, and then it's on the video, and then I won't have to remember. So half a pumpkin weighs, it's going to be about 9 kilos, so that's 4.5 kilos is that one. So the other half, so that's another 4.5 kilos, so that's about 9 kilos. So I will work out how much pulp we get from half the pumpkin, which we're just going to make into the soup with the onions. Easy peasy, eh? So the sides weigh something slightly different. One side was obviously bigger than the other. So this side, there is 3.75 kilos worth of pulp, well, flesh, and then there's 1.65 kilos of waste, which is the seeds and the skin. Why can't I say skin? Why can't I say skin? So, and then this other pumpkin weighs 4.5 kilos, so we'll kind of get a good ratio of how much flesh we're getting to waste in a pumpkin, and then we can work out what type of yield of soup that we get. So I've removed the seeds from this side, and this side is going to be the one that gets roasted, and it was 4.5 kilos, and it weighs 4.08 kilos. So we lost about 500 grams worth of pulp from the inside. So that's kind of purely for my interest. So I'll be able to find out what happens once we've roasted them. I'll weigh them again. All a bit geeky, but just out of interest for myself. Right, it's a bit noisy because I'm at work and the extractors are on. So the pumpkins are in the oven and they are roasting away. I'll show you. So I'm not roasting them hard, I'm just roasting them kind of quite slowly because we just want them to lose a bit of moisture and soften. So the edges there are already starting to be cooked. That's how I want it all the way through. So it just takes a little bit of time, 150 degrees, no kind of great rush. We'll lose some moisture, which isn't a bad thing because the pumpkins are kind of quite wet. So because we're roasting the onion, well, not really roasting, because we're cooking the pumpkins in the oven for that batch of soup, I'm going to cook the onions beforehand in just a little bit of liquid just to soften them, because there isn't going to be enough cooking time when we add the cooked pumpkin to that to fully cook the onions, and we want them to be fully cooked. In this pan we have the chopped up onions and the chopped up pumpkin, which we're going to cook on top of the stove. Doesn't need too much water, so there's about a litre of boiling water there, and then temperature on underneath, and that wants a lid as well. So it's going to steam more than it is going to boil the pumpkin, so it can just sit there with the lid on and slowly tenderize. You will find that as the pumpkins cook, a lot of moisture will come out of them, and that panel will sink that down. So it's starting there. By the time the pumpkins are cooked, I'm reckoning that it'll be kind of like half that volume. but you'll see when they're cooked. So, onions are those onions cooked enough? Yeah, they're cooked enough. Right, those onions cooked enough, so we can turn that heat off and bring this up to the boil and then a slow simmer just to soften everything in the pan. Easy peasy. I've cooked the pumpkin and it's soft. So, simple case of scraping, or if it's not a bit too warm, scraping the pumpkin flesh out of the pumpkins, and it saves you all that chopping. So that out of there just kind of makes things a little bit easier if you're not particularly good with your chopping skills. The only danger with that is that you might dry the pumpkins out a little bit too well. When they're cooking, they might dry out, and so you might need to strain your soup. But if you're worried about chopping, that's a nice easy alternative. And then just a simple case of adding to your cooked onions and pureeing down. So these can go in there like that, and then we'll puree it down. But I'm not going to do that one because I don't want the video to be too long. So we'll sort them out in a minute. That there. These are the ones that are chopped up and cooked down. So as you can see, it's really come down in volume. I just need a chopping board, so that's a little bit more stable. So then, soup is now easy, straightforward. You just need to puree it with some stock cubes in. I look at that and I think that's going to need 8 stock cubes. So that's 8, yeah, that's definitely 8 stock cubes. And then big industrial soup mixer, well, maker. So be a bit noisy, but I can't remember with a small blender. As you can see, that forms some soup kind of quite easy. And for not, so what did we put in? A litre of liquid, and it's already a soup that's an okay consistency. So we need to add some milk or cream, and we need 4 more stock cubes in that. So I'm using the stock cubes as seasoning. I could have put some chicken stock in, or I did have some ham stock, but I've got other things I want to do with that, so just stock cubes today. Chicken ones because it doesn't need to be vegetarian. So 4 more stock cubes, and then we're going to add some milk. Not too much milk, just to add a little bit of creaminess to it. See how much we want to add. How much has this one got in it? Right, so we'll add a pint of milk. That'll thin it down and also enrich it up as well. And it doesn't need to be any more pureed. It's nice and smooth on the spoon, so it doesn't need pure. It doesn't need putting through a sieve. It tastes delicious. So there you go, easy peasy. Right, let's get the blender out of the way, and then we're going to see what yield we get from it. So easiest way to do this is from one jug to another. So we keep one jug which we dip into the soup. So that's 4 pints or 2 litres. That's another 2 litres, and then we'll be able to pour the rest in. Bang the excess soup up there. Those 2 out of the way. And then I'll just bravely pour this soup in, and we'll see how much we get. So when the pumpkins are starting to be sold off really cheap in the supermarket, buy a couple. You should keep for a few weeks, and you'll be able to make delicious pumpkin soup. From that, we have made 5 litres of delicious pumpkin soup. So it might need a bit more pepper. It'll certainly need, because we've added stock cubes to it, and we've added some milk to it, it'll have cooled it down. So we just need to reboil before we kind of eat it. The nature of the soup that we've just made sometimes wants to split, so the milk wants to kind of split away from the pulp of the pumpkin. So we just need to put the blender back in just before we serve it, and then it'll be a nice emulsified soup again. But relatively straightforward, relatively easy, and that's what you do if you're going to chop the pumpkins. Now, same process. Once you've sculpted out all the pumpkin pulp into there, bring it up to the boil, stick the blender in, add a little bit more water, add some stock cubes, add a little bit of milk, and away you go. But it will make the same kind of yield. You'll have evaporated off some of the water in the pumpkins as you've cooked them in the oven, but you'll just need to replace that water with a little bit that you add to the pan. So hopefully that's pretty straightforward. And for all the people who kind of say the big Halloween pumpkins that have got no flavour to them, that's the proof. It's really quite nice and tasty and cheap. Right, so this is the pumpkins that we roasted. I've taken them all off, away from the skins, and I've added them to the pan that had the onions in. Let's see how it purees down. I've put in 10 stock cubes. 10? Yes, 10. So we'll see how it purees down, and if we need to put it through a sieve. So it's quite thick, so we'll add some water. I'll get a spoon and we'll just see what it is. No, that looks like it's pureed down okay. That's alright. So, there we go. Both methods work. Personally, I prefer the chopping up the pumpkin and pureeing it and cooking it in the pan rather than roasting it. It seems like a bit of a faff. But if your knife skills aren't that good, you can always just chop your pumpkin up with a saw into 8s, roast them in the oven and make the soup like that. Yeah, it's delicious. It needs some milk in it. But you don't need to see that. It's going to make the same kind of yield. Both yields are going to make the same amount of pumpkin depending on how much pumpkin in, so it doesn't matter if you roast it or you cook it in the pan, it's still going to give you the same yield for the weight that it was before you cooked it, if that makes sense. So there we go, pumpkin soup, delicious. Buy loads of cheap supermarket pumpkins, make some soup, freeze it. If you're going to preserve it in jars, don't preserve it in a jar after you've added the milk to it, because the milk will ferment. Once you put it in the jar and sealed it in the jar, the milk will ferment and start to ferment after a couple of weeks, and it will turn it bad. So if you're going to jar soups, don't add milk. You'll be fine with just the puree of the pumpkin, the onion, stock and the water. Add the milk, leave it a little bit thick, then add the milk when you open the jar and heat the soup up, then add the milk at the very end. It's a soup, when you're heating the soup up, it splits out a little bit, so it looks like it's got like milk fat in there, or globules of fat. Just put the blender back through it, and it will just re-emulsify the soup. There you go, easy peasy pumpkin soup.